Now that we can say with some certainty that if Tyler Robinson indeed shot Charlie Kirk, he shot him for personal reasons because he saw Kirk as a direct threat to somebody he loved. That Robinson was not a stochastic proxy murderer from Antifa or the Groypers or the right-wingers who had so recently called Kirk a fraud.
So what I opened this video with is a clip from Keith Olbermann's YouTube channel, and that is something that I never believed existed until I decided to do research for this story, but unfortunately, as Anna Kasparian has told us,
it's real, guys, it's real.
Now, the reason I decided to open with that clip were Keith Olbermann, the former face of MSNBC, so somebody who was once very prominent in Democratic Party politics, not some random TikToker, is because he's legitimately trying to make the case to the very few people that watch him on the internet.com that in reality, Tyler Robinson did not actually kill Charlie Kirk for political reasons. In fact, his motivations for killing Charlie Kirk were personal and didn't have anything to do with agenda hysteria due to left-wing rhetoric about what Charlie Kirk believed and what he was going to enact upon the world. It was all personal because he felt like Charlie Kirk was a personal threat to his relationship. Now, of course, anybody with any kind of functioning brain would not be watching the Keith Olbermann shorts being put up on YouTube.com. But in addition to that, they would find it rather odd and rather curious that Tyler Robinson, who did not know Charlie Kirk personally, was somehow in fear that Charlie Kirk was going to come to his apartment and basically churn his trans's gay boyfriend that's also a furry into a straight upstanding Christian and end his relationship. Like, that is an absurd proposal, but Keith Olbermann actually says it with a straight face in this video because in reality, it was political. Again, if you think Charlie Kirk is a threat to your gay, furry, trans's romance, that is because people in the media have ginned up so much hysteria about Charlie Kirk that you have become afraid of him in that way, and obviously those are political motivations. Yet Keith Olbermann tells the very few people that are listening to him the exact opposite with absolute confidence, all because he wants to put the mask back on due to the fact that the left has revealed themselves to be bloodthirsty and, of course, supportive of political assassinations. Now, of course, Keith Olbermann is unhinged. Of course, Keith Olbermann lacks all self-control and all self-discipline. That is why he gets fired from every single job he's ever had, and embarrassingly so, that's why people who work with him constantly talk about, even if they agree with him, how much he sucks to be around. So on Twitter.com, shortly after posting this video about how Tyler Robinson just had personal concerns about Charlie Kirk, completely unrelated to politics, he ends up allegedly threatening Scott Jennings of CNN, saying, "You're next, mother effer," on X.com. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Live on the Salem Radio Network, marking myself safe from that nut, Keith Olbermann, who you might have read, threatened yours truly on the internet yesterday. Everybody seems to have taken notice of this. The poster boy for left-wing outrage, the poster boy for complete broken brain progressivism, threatening me, of all people.
So look, Scott Jennings is essentially the one person that is allowed to say right-wing things on CNN. He is very entertaining. He is also known for making faces at the camera while left-wingers are spewing all sorts of nonsense, and we really do appreciate him, especially since friend of the channel, Ryan Gerdusky, was booted off the air at CNN for giving a little bit too much of that Northeastern wit to Mehdi Hasan when he made the joke about Mehdi's pager going off. So Scott Jennings, for all intents and purposes, is the guy over at CNN. He is the only one. He stands up to the entire mob, and he does a great job when he does so. And Scott Jennings has had a lot of thoughts on the firing of Jimmy Kimmel. In fact, post the announcement that Jimmy Kimmel would be returning to the ABC airwaves, Scott Jennings made the case that it wasn't actually the FCC threatening ABC that made them suspend him. It was just a regular, ordinary suspension, which of course is what he was saying all along. Now, of course, I've made my thoughts clear clear about how the FCC commissioner should have just shut his mouth. He should not have intervened, and the fact that apparently him talking didn't really do anything, all that did was allow people like Keith Olbermann to pretend that Jimmy Kimmel is the victim of government censorship when that is not the case. And by the way, if they were legitimate threats, that would also not be good. In reality, as I said repeatedly on this channel, I have absolutely no sympathy for people being fired or suspended for their opinion if that opinion is you should be shot for expressing the wrong opinion. So I have no sympathy for Jimmy Kimmel at all whatsoever, but what I was actually thinking was happening behind the scenes is that people were outraged and they were deploying the left's tactics against them, and I think that's A+, first class all the way, and well deserved. I would have loved to just come on to this channel and play all the different various clips of Jimmy Kimmel celebrating the firing of other people for significantly lesser offenses, but in reality, we're unable to do that due to the fact that the FCC chair, for no reason, muddied the water on this issue. And again, if you think it didn't do anything, then guess what? It wasn't productive, didn't accomplish anything. If you think it did do something, then that's also a problem because you pressured all these different affiliates to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel, and now the backlash is so strong to a certain extent that Jimmy Kimmel is back on the air and again has more political capital than he did prior because his ratings were absolutely tanking. But again, these are normal disagreements amongst normal people that understand that murder is not a response to normal disagreements. However, Keith Olbermann apparently decided to go absolutely ape you-know-what in the replies of Scott Jennings, and this is where the alleged threat comes into play, according to the New York Post, where they say he apparently threatened Scott Jennings. So the New York Post has these excerpts of the now deleted tweets where Keith Olbermann is saying, "You're next, mother effer, but keep mugging the camera." Now again, based on the reading that most people are taking of these particular replies, and based on the fact that Keith Olbermann ended up deleting those replies, most people are taking these tweets for what they seem to be, which is Keith Olbermann telling Scott Jennings he's next, as in Charlie Kirk was first, Scott Jennings must fall after that, and thus this is a clear and obvious call to violence, if not an outright threat against Scott Jennings' life. And I will remind you that that whole spiel about Tyler Robinson having personal motivations about Charlie Kirk,
he shot him for personal reasons because he saw Kirk as a direct threat to somebody he loved. That Robinson was not a stochastic proxy murderer.
The reason that was so ridiculous is because Keith Olbermann was trying to make the case that it wasn't left-wing stochastic terrorism, which, by the way, is a kind of made-up left-wing term, but if you hold them to their own standards, what it means is when you put out a lot of incendiary rhetoric, somebody that is unhinged might hear that, end up actually engaging in said terrorism. Therefore, even though we can't draw a direct link between the speaker and the actor, you are still responsible for raising the overall temperature in society. So Keith Olbermann was very much trying to reject the notion that the left wing does that very same thing. However, of course, in this particular context, he appears to be saying "you're next" as if to directly encourage somebody that might be in his audience to target Scott Jennings next on the list. So yeah, it seems like Keith Olbermann absolutely knows what he was doing right there. He got caught, he got called out for it, so he deleted the tweets as a way to, ignore the fact that he was openly calling for the next assassination while simultaneously trying to downplay in his other videos the political motivation of Tyler Robinson by trying to pin it down on a personal motivation. Again, there is no personal motivation at all whatsoever for you, a regular, ordinary person who has never interacted with Charlie Kirk in your entire life, to believe that Charlie Kirk poses a threat to your relationship. Obviously, and I mean obviously, this is a political position, a political concern, and people like Keith Olbermann, who again allude to violence, label their enemies fascists all the time, come off as unhinged, are in part responsible for stoking up across the country. Now, the defenders of Olbermann will point to these other tweets that, by the way, are available through screenshots that say that he was only talking about getting rid of Scott Jennings' job. He wasn't actually talking about killing Scott Jennings. Therefore, even though these appear to be threats, even though these appear to be concerning, in reality, in actuality, Keith Olbermann was just saying, "You're next," in terms of "we're gonna pull you off air, Scott Jennings because you're a bad person who does no speak. Therefore, this is just totally taken out of context by really evil bad people who just want to get Keith Olbermann for his freedom of speech. And oftentimes what will be cited are screenshots of these two tweets. It says, "We won, you stupid pieces of S. Last fold to fascism was last week." And then in response to that, it says, "Now we get fascists off real TV. That mean your career is next, Jennings. Send the tape to Real America's Voice. Keep mugging to the camera, you amateur." Now, a lot of people who are going to be overly generous to Keith Olbermann will say, oh, well, the same sentiment is being highlighted right here. So this is what Keith Olbermann actually meant when he said, "Your next, mother effer." Therefore, people are just ripping it out of context because, again, he was just talking about removing Scott Jennings from his job. However, without time codes on the screenshots of the other tweets, it appears that we can't know the date and time comparatively that this was posted versus those other tweets that have since been deleted. So in reality, this could be Keith Olbermann tweeting something out, realizing that it sounds like a threat and thus backtracking, which, by the way, would be a good thing. That would be a positive thing. It would show that he has a little bit of sense. Or it could be Keith Olbermann actually tweeting out a threat, trying to gin up that hysteria against Scott Jennings, then getting caught and deciding to put these out in order to cover his backside after, again, trying to pretend that the left wing doesn't turn up the temperature, doesn't encourage violence, while simultaneously being a left-winger that is directly turning up the temperature and encouraging violence. Now, based on everything that I've seen, the totality of it, I'm not actually sure what the intention was behind these tweets, if I'm being perfectly honest. But what I am 100% sure of is that Keith Olbermann would deliberately ignore context, deliberately lie to people out there in his audience in order to convey the message that he wanted, even if there was contextual refutation of the point he was trying to make, even if there was direct evidence proving 100% he's absolutely wrong, he would still not tell the truth about it. So if you guys want to get Keith Olbermann fired from whatever job he still might have at some point, although I believe he's unemployed, and by the way, if he is employed, he's on his way to being fired from that job already, then feel free to do so because he's an absolute scumbag and 100% deserves it. And by the way, the fact that he deleted it at least acknowledges the fact that he understood how it was being read, he understood how it came off, and that might be because when he originally wrote it in his rage fit, that is how he intended for it to come off. And again, while I can't say for 100% certainty that he was calling for violence against Scott Jennings, this is a guy who has embraced the violence against Charlie Kirk. Even if you could find a clip or a tweet of him saying, "I condemn political violence," he's been doing the thing that we've seen many left-wingers doing, where he says, "Oh, I condemn it," in a little tiny baby breath, but then goes out of his way to defame the guy with the same exact quotes and the same exact arguments from those people on TikTok.com that are just publicly endorsing his assassination and providing backwards justifications in order to do so. So yeah, Keith Olbermann, you're absolute scum. You deserve to be named and shamed. You deserve to be humiliated. And honestly, let the chips fall where they may, because like I said before, I don't give a damn about people suffering social consequences for their opinion when that opinion is that you should suffer murder for your opinion. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. This is my very fair and even breakdown of the whole Keith Olbermann situation. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Keith Olbermann descending further into madness. Till next time.